Did you know that plastic can be converted into vanilla flavoring, or that a diabetic person's urine can be used to make whiskey? This is why I love my job. The bizarre facts I get to tell you about are amazing. After all, scientists are learning new things every day, and something we don't know about today could be blowing your mind tomorrow. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are the most bizarre facts about science. If you ever find yourself swallowing a razor blade, we're here to tell you that there's no need to worry. There's probably a few reasons to worry. The body of a human being is far more competent than you may believe. Acids get rated on a scale from 0 to 14. The more potent the acid, the lower its pH level. Our stomach acid typically ranges anywhere between 1 and 2, meaning it's incredibly powerful. In one study, scientists dumped a razor in stomach acid and waited. The razor was dissolved within 2 hours. That means you can swallow those watermelon seeds without worrying about something growing in your stomach. I mean, if stomach acids can dissolve razor blades, seeds will never survive. Sometimes flowers and plants look so good that you can just eat them. And in many cases, that's true. If you come across a bunch of violet flowers, they're actually perfectly edible. Dozens of recipes use wild violet, especially to complement desserts. It can be made into sugar, squeezed into syrup, or crushed into biscuits. It adds an exciting bit of sweetness and color to any dish. And I don't think I've ever craved a flower so much. We're kicking off today's list with an experiment conducted on unsuspecting spiders. Because why not? In 1955, scientists made an attempt to come up with a unique technique to detect schizophrenia. They fed a concentration of 15 schizophrenics' urine to spiders and compared the resultant webs they spun to those made by spiders who had been fed the researchers' urine instead. No systematic differences could be observed. However, the researchers did discover one thing: concentrated urine tastes exceptionally horrible. After only one sip, the spiders expressed an intense aversion to any further interaction with the concentrated solution. So now we know that. Alright, spiders don't like concentrated urine? Check. Experiment a success. Checking a pregnancy by peeing on a stick isn't as new as it seems. Women have been doing something similar for thousands of years, all the way back to ancient Egypt. But instead of a stick, they actually urinated onto seeds of either wheat or barley. The theory was that if the seeds sprouted quickly, the test was positive. Researchers repeated these tests in 1963 and found that between 80 to 85% of the time, the method worked. Scientists believe that it's because women's urine is packed full of the hormone estrogen during pregnancy. I just had flashbacks to elementary school with people calling me Michael Estrogen. Didn't help that they created a product called Estrin D. One day, I was called Estrogen over and over and over again. I was kind of teased. I'm like, I'm going to show everyone. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna find my name. So I looked up my name in the dictionary, Estrogen. And I'm like, yeah. And I look and it says short for estrogen. And I'm like, nope. So the next day they're like, well, did you find it? I go, nope. I lied. Sorry, second grade class at Gorey Elementary in Tampa, Florida. Miss McWilliams' class. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, really. Look up a few experiments online if you don't believe me. It's all due to a spectacle known as total internal reflection. This phenomenon takes place when light particles travel through a material of specific density and end up at a boundary where the density is a bit less. When it comes to laser beams and water, you should remember that water is heavier than light. That means that the laser beam enters the water and is immediately slowed down by the heavier water particles. Therefore, the laser beam literally becomes trapped in the water. Trust me, it's there? Oh, this is probably not showing up well. And you thought science wasn't cool. Crime detection techniques have come a long way over the last few hundred years. Instead of relying on the deduction of Sherlock Holmes, now we have fingerprints, DNA, digital profiles, and voice recognition to use as evidence. Soon, you'll be able to add walking to that list. It may sound strange, but the way you walk involves a complex interaction between a network of muscles, creating a subtle but detectable pattern. Some scientists even believe that this pattern is as unique as a fingerprint. In 1970, a supposed expert named Dr. Myron L. Fox gave a talk on mathematical game theory as applied to physician education to a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists. The speaker, however, was an actor who had absolutely zero knowledge of the subject. The lecture's goal was to investigate educational seduction. Dr. Fox used his acting skills to connect with the audience during the experiment, even though the content was completely nonsensical and had a lot of gibberish. Surprisingly, the lecture was judged as captivating and informative by the audience. The phenomenon was dubbed the Dr. Fox effect. The study highlighted how a charismatic speaker can fool intelligent people into believing worthless information. One reporter later commented, if an actor can be a better teacher, they can also be a better congressman or even the president. Funnily enough, 10 years later, Ronald Reagan was elected president of the US. Next time an old person tells you that they can feel the rain coming in their joints, don't be so quick to dismiss them. The science isn't exactly clear, but there is no shortage of research on the topic. Studies going back to the 90s have looked into the phenomenon, with some finding that small decreases in pressure really were felt by some people's bodies, especially people with conditions like arthritis. Fluids running in between our joints, keeping them oiled up and working properly, might be responding to changes in the air, like pressure or temperature. Earth's magnetic field has long been a champion for the life this planet harbors. Formed by the planet's rotation, it responds to the electrical currents created by the Earth's core. But did you know that it isn't just humans using the planet's magnetic field to navigate? The theory that migratory animals use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate was first proposed by scientists in the 1960s, but it was viewed with skepticism because it couldn't be proved. It was only recently discovered that migratory animals house magnetite cells in their bodies, the same material used by our ancestors to make compasses. Now we know that birds migrate using the polarity of north and south, only they don't need a little gauge with directions on it to do so. Other creatures, turtles for example, identify specific areas based on their magnetic signatures in order to locate them in the future. Who said that video games were a waste of time? As each year passes, more research is proving the benefits of playing video games. One study found that gamers are quicker and more accurate in their decision making, faster than a non-gamer by about 190 microseconds on average. When it comes to brain processing speeds, this is an enormous difference. Researchers believe that it's because playing video games trains the brain to better map action, perception, and sensation, which all work to improve processing time. Playing video games could even one day be a method of cognitive training. I mean, imagine your doctor prescribing 10 hours of Xbox. In January 1986, 11 guys went to bed in Moscow and didn't get up for the following 370 days. They were bathed lying down, they ate, read, watched TV, and wrote letters, all while lying down. The study was conducted to simulate the consequences of weightlessness on Earth. While similar studies had been done before, the 370-day time frame was the longest attempt ever, and it had several unforeseen complications in addition to the medical outcomes. Some marriages failed due to stress, and one of the men fell in love with the scientist involved in the project. As a reward for their efforts, each member was offered a car, a hot commodity in the Soviet era. Not that it's likely to happen anytime soon, I hope, but did you know that peanut butter really can be used to remove gum? It's what's called hydrophobic, meaning that it doesn't mix well with water. For a piece of gum caught in between your hair, this is exactly what you want because it removes the stickiness, making it easier to pull out. All you need to do is lather some in and wait for the gum to harden before pulling it out. And maybe take a shower or two afterwards. You may not realize it, but soil, especially healthy soil, is practically alive. It's made up of millions of species and billions of organisms which all come together to create the diverse and complex blend of microscopic and macroscopic life that exists as the most influential concentration of biomass anywhere on our planet. To put this into perspective, the number of living organisms in a single teaspoon of soil exceeds the actual number of humans currently alive on Earth, which is about 8 billion right now. God, I remember when that hit 6. We've all drifted off to sleep as Netflix autoplays a bunch of episodes, but it's probably best not to. And not just because you'll miss what's happening in your favorite show. The blue light that comes from your TV, especially at night when you should be sleeping, has some pretty negative effects. The artificial light interrupts your sleep cycles as well as your appetite and eating habits, which is why it's linked to weight gain. So if you're trying to lose a few pounds, try turning off the TV early. Sleep is much more important than we usually realize. Scientists finally figured out the answer to a question that has kept housewives and nut connoisseurs up since time immemorial. Why do Brazil nuts always end up at the top of the bag? After wasting several hours mixing nuts and shaking the bags, they discovered the answer, doing x-rays after each shake. Turns out that Brazil nuts move into vertical positions when being shaken, and they get pushed upwards with every shake. The scientists hope their earth-shattering findings will aid engineers in developing better methods to minimize size segregation in other mixes, which, while critical for bags of nuts, could also have crucial uses in medicine and construction. Is there anything more annoying than hiccups? I mean, probably, but go with me here. You might have eaten too fast, been laughing too hard, probably from watching the List 25 video, or your body might be having difficulty processing some food. Whatever the reason, I think we've all heard dozens of fixes that are said to magically cure them. Most of them don't work. That is, most. If you find yourself helplessly gulping in the future, try putting a teaspoon of sugar in your mouth. What this does is stimulate parts of the vagus nerve, which is the one controlling digestion, along with a bunch of other important functions. When this nerve is overloaded, the hiccups are interrupted and stop. According to research, 95% of people were immediately cured of hiccups using this method. I wonder if it would have helped that guy who hiccuped for like 85 years or something like that? 60 years? 30 years? It's a long time. We've done videos on that. Maybe we'll throw it up here. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just look silly doing this. Why do I feel like laughing just by reading that sentence? It must be because I'm incredibly ticklish, but this has given me a whole new perspective on rats. Researchers have taken careful notes about the pleasure rats seem to take when it comes to playing with humans, like running to a human hand to engage in chasing games that end up with their bellies being tickled. In fact, they now believe the high-pitched sounds and excited jumping, the latter known as Freudensprünge, a delightful word that you can go your entire life without hearing, and then once you do, you have no idea how you lived without it, is how they express laughter and their pleasure with a loving attention. You ever hear the expression that your ears are burning when someone's talking about you? Well, in a certain sense, that could technically be true. Sound actually generates heat. Both sound and heat are just atoms moving through the air in different ways. Unfortunately, for us to feel or measure any noticeable heat change, the amount of sound and speed of atoms would have to be extremely high. So a gossiper would have to be talking very loudly for your ears to heat up. We know that a human-cow hybrid may sound like something from a terrible science fiction novel. Still, a Dutch biotech firm may introduce this phenomenon to your table faster than you imagine. Scientists genetically modified cows to ensure that the milk they produce includes the human protein lactoferrin, which can be found in human breast milk. The protein prevents a wide range of diseases and is an excellent immune system booster. Scientists are hoping to make dairy products with comparable health benefits and nutrition using the protein-packed milk. Sorry, I didn't get any spider urine. Just have the milk. Contains milk. Nailed it. Really? Yeah, no, I guess. Reduced fat milk, vitamin A, palmitate, and vitamin D3? Nice. Yeah, I didn't grab a glass. This'll have to do. I'm the only one who's gonna drink this, don't judge me. When a baby arrives into the world for the first time, do they arrive more than once? They're brand new. That's one way of putting it. Sometimes, though, they look a little older than others, with spots of hair already on their head. This isn't actually random, and the connection is quite surprising. If a mother experiences significant heartburn, then the baby is more likely to have hair. Oh, there's another reason to keep in shape, otherwise your kid might come out looking like a member of ZZ Top. Hang on, that might not be such a bad thing. I've heard this fact before, but, I didn't really believe it. Bananas are somewhat radioactive because they are high in potassium, and potassium-40, which is radioactive, is one of its natural isotopes. However, before you start burying your bananas in lead-lined coffins, you should know that you'd have to eat about 5 million of them to get anything resembling radiation sickness. And by then, it would all be for naught, because you might have turned yourself into a banana. Did you ever play with a big pile of slime when you were a kid? If so, your parents might have given you more than just a good time. Slime has been shown to have an excellent effect on your mental health, from depression and anxiety to increasing concentration. In fact, there are videos right here on YouTube with millions of views where people simply touch slime, and I wish I was kidding. While we're on the subject of human hybrids, in 2005, human embryonic stem cells were implanted into the brains of fetal mice while they were still in the womb. Scientists then discovered that human brain cells formed alongside the mouse brain cells after the mice were born, demonstrating that human stem cells can turn into human brain cells in other living animals. Scientists hope this technique will increase scientific studies on human brain disorders and improve our testing of experimental drugs and specific medical trials. What's the first thing you do if you say something that you don't want to happen? Well, you knock on wood, of course. The superstition probably comes from the Celts, who had a strong attachment to trees, which were near mythological forms. Touching or knocking a tree was likely a way of ensuring good luck. Although you are unlikely to summon the spirit of a Celtic god by tapping on your coffee table, it might still help. Some psychologists believe that these kind of superstitions help us make sense of the world and can even work to suppress anxiety and fears while improving our performance in certain areas. The daily life of an astronaut in the International Space Station doesn't often cross our minds. Literally miles away from anything or anyone, their lives are seldom sufficiently documented. However, if you get curious one day, you can find hundreds of little problems these guys have had to deal with on a daily basis. One inconvenience is the fact that you can't burp in space. It's true. You see, on Earth, gravity moves all the solids and liquids in your stomach to the bottom, while the gases are free to move to the top and escape, so to speak. However, with gravity absent in space, gases, liquids, and solids remain mixed. As such, should you burp in space, it won't just be a funky smell leaving your mouth. When you hear silicon, what do you think of? Silicon Valley? Silicon chips? Everything associated with the word has something to do with technology and computers, but did you know that some organisms actually rely on it? In fact, we have silicon in the connective tissue in our body called collagen. Without it, we wouldn't be as flexible or able to heal as well after injuries. If you added up all the silicon in the human body, it would be around 7 grams, or enough for 1.5 computer chips. Have you seen the movie Eye in the Sky? The Army makes use of fascinating bugs to help them take out their targets. If you did, it was actually a great movie, and wondered where the idea came from, well, want to know more. DARPA-funded scientists at the University of California implanted electrodes in enormous flower beetles in 2009, allowing them to wirelessly instruct the beetles to turn, take off, or hover in mid-flight. The Pentagon can deploy these technological terrors to aid them with search and rescue missions, and they also come with the added benefit of covert surveillance and monitoring. That gives a whole new meaning to bugged. You ever wonder why we cross our fingers for good luck? It dates back thousands of years to when Christians were targeted for their beliefs. Crossing the fingers was a way to secretly have the cross with them at all times. It looks nothing like one though. There may still be a good reason to keep doing it though, even if you aren't Christian. Research has found that crossing our fingers can be used to interpret extreme feelings of pain. Don't worry though, nobody was really harmed in the experiment. Instead, participants had alternating fingers connected to either hot or cold sensations, which tricks the brain into thinking the hand is burning. Some participants were told to cross their fingers during the experiment, and surprisingly, it reduced their amount of pain. Before you enjoy that vanilla cupcake too much, ask yourself, where did this vanilla flavoring come from? There's a lot of money to be made in the upcycling business. Plastics currently lose over 95% of their value after a single use. As such, researchers have started looking at ways to make upcycling more lucrative, and discovered that a specific type of bacteria can convert terephthalic acid, TA, into vanillin. Vanillin is widely employed in the food and cosmetics industry, and in cleaning products, pharmaceuticals, and herbicides. Global demand is increasing and reached 37,000 metric tons in 2018, far exceeding the demand for natural vanilla beans. At present, around 85% of vanillin is produced artificially from chemicals derived from fossil fuels. Lurking deep beneath the ocean's surface are thousands of species that scientists still don't completely understand. One of those is benthic, also known as deep-sea benthos. Unlike many other species on Earth, benthos have adapted their metabolic system to survive at extremely low temperatures, far away from sunlight. Some live thousands of meters under the Arctic Ocean, far below thick layers of ice, which is why very little research has been carried out on them. One thing we do know is that they mainly live off of particles of food that fall from above, so they're kind of like the compost of the ocean. COVID really messed with our minds. In 2020, scientists put 3D glasses on a cuttlefish to observe how they attacked their prey. The University of Minnesota scientists showed the mollusks images of tasty-looking shrimp to understand how they evaluate distance before attacking. The scientists admitted that convincing the cuttlefish to wear the glasses was the most challenging part of the experiment. Yeah. The team worried they would pull them off or splash ink into their aquariums. As such, they devised a unique strategy that included careful handling, diversion, and bribery with a significant amount of shrimp. Cuttlefish have some really weird eyes, even by the standards of aquatic life. The wavy-looking slits move independently of one another, providing the mollusks with a 360-degree field of vision. Following their ridiculously strange experiment, the scientists determined that cuttlefish use stereopsis to triangulate distance. Another way to get good luck is by throwing salt over your shoulder. Well, at least that's the superstition. This one also goes all the way back to the time of Jesus Christ. In that famous painting of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, Judas is knocking over a jar of salt. Not a very good dinner guest, it turns out. Nor was he a good friend, which is why salt became associated with betrayal and disloyalty. The action might even help ease feelings of guilt that you might have about something. That Salt Bay guy must have a guilt-free life then. It's a truly bizarre but proven fact. Men are more likely to be colorblind than women. This is because colorblindness is caused by genes on the X chromosome. And I know what you're thinking. Women have 2, so they should have the greater numbers, right? Well, unfortunately, since us men only have 1, we only need 1 defective chromosome to be colorblind. My dad was actually colorblind. And left-handed. Rest in peace, Dad. I miss you. In school, we learned about photosynthesis, the way that plants take in sunlight and water to produce oxygen. It's a vital part of our plant's ecosystem, but did you know that it's not only plants that do it? Algae, that huge, swampy-looking sea organism, usually colored green, also goes through the stages of photosynthesizing. And that's not all. Algae, which goes back to more than 1 billion years, is actually more efficient at photosynthesis than many crops growing in soil, which evolved from algae hundreds of millions of years later. It just goes to show that sometimes the newer version isn't always better. Once upon a time, scientists were really perplexed by the 24-hour day patterns we lived by and wondered if the sleep-wake pattern of 24 hours was simply a habit that could be changed at any time, or whether people had an intrinsic, hardwired biological clock. Nathaniel Kleitman, a sleep researcher, searched for a location where there existed no distinction between day and night. He found it in a 20-meter wide and 8-meter high rock chamber in Kentucky's Mammoth Cave. Hey, I've been there. Not to that chamber, though. Well, maybe, I don't know. Where he and a student named Bruce Richardson decided to play around with a 28-hour day. They would work for 10 hours, sleep for 9, and have leisure time for 9 hours every day. The two stayed in the cave for a total of 32 days. Richardson, the younger of the two, adapted within less than a week, whereas Kleitman failed to adapt, showing that we should all try new things while we're still young. It is not a good idea to walk underneath a ladder for many reasons. One is obvious: safety. But another is not so clear. Why is it so connected to misfortune? One story is from the times of the dreaded gallows, when condemned people used ladders to climb up to a rope before meeting their maker. Back to the first reason though, walking underneath a ladder, especially on a work site, is just plain dangerous. So whether superstitious or not, it's probably good advice to follow. And that includes the coronaviruses. Bats can contract and transmit viruses, but based on the European Commission's funded studies, bats also have an arsenal of antiviral genes that keep them safe. Rabies is the exception. However, while rabies can make bats sick, it rarely kills them. Now, before you start hating bats, try to see them as rats with wings. That probably won't help some people. And then remember how much they like playing with us and getting their bellies tickled. I promise, it helps. They're like sky puppies. When I was in Singapore, there was a bat and he was this close to me, hanging upside down. We just had little conversations. Lovely creatures. I love bats. I think they're fantastic. They're adorable. The smell of freshly cut grass. There's just something so sweet and comforting about it. It turns out it might be the chemicals. When cut, grass releases a bunch of organic compounds known as green leaf volatiles, which act as first aid for the grass. That smell is these compounds releasing, which includes aldehydes used in perfumes and alcohols, which could be why that smell seems so soothing. Does anyone remember the movie Underdog? I mean, I remember the show. Was there a movie for Underdog? Huh, I remember the show. Do you remember the show? Great show. He was a shoe shiner. Always bit the coin. Anyway, our next entry is a strange experiment that straddles the line between awesome and terrifying. Canines with double their usual muscle mass. In 2015, geneticists at Nanjing University in China discovered a way to remove the myostatin gene from dog embryos. The gene reduces animal muscle growth. Hercules and Tiangao, the resulting power pups, became the first dogs with these specific genetic modifications. Scientists hope that the trial will eventually contribute to the discovery of a treatment for human ailments such as muscular dystrophy. When spooky coincidences or strange events pop up, you might check the calendar to see if it's Friday the 13th, even if just out of curiosity. In astrology, the number 13 is associated with death. The myth has become so strong that it's spilled over into science. The medical term triskaidekaphobia refers to the fear of the number 13. Some buildings even intentionally skip the 13th floor. And for some reason, we put a fact about 13 on number 16. Maybe we're superstitious. Who knows? I'm not. If you've been secretly waiting to develop secret powers X-Men style, then I've got good news. While we may not have the ability to be venomous right now, we will very likely evolve to be venomous in the future. Scientists have closed a long open door by linking early salivary glands to the tissues that eventually evolved into venom glands in several species. Because saliva is the common thread, anyone with salivary glands, from mice to humans, could eventually develop venom. The missing piece is not in genes or mechanisms, but in the contents of what the glands release, special proteins. If that's at number 15, I bet you're wondering what we have at number 1 on today's list, so stick around. I promise you, it's gonna be worth it. A good cry has many functions. It releases feel-good chemicals, gets rid of toxins, and even helps to fight off bacteria. But when you get all choked up about something, you might have noticed that your nose tends to run too. That's because they're both part of the same system. After tears well up in the eye, they have to go somewhere, and that place is in the tiny openings at the top of the nose where they drain through the tubes known as tear ducts. For years, we have placed radio frequency identification, or RFID chips into our pets to assist in identifying and returning them if they get lost. We didn't foresee that the technology would eventually be used to follow and track us. In 2004, the FDA approved human implantation, which meant that jails, hospitals, and businesses all decided to utilize the chip to track people's locations and medical history, and give or restrict access to rooms and documents. If you thought it was still a far-off idea, well, I'm here to correct that notion. Many state correctional facilities today already use the technology to track convicts' movements and locations, and few corporations have already jumped on board. Horseshoes have been used for centuries as a symbol of strength and good fortune, and can be traced back to the Celts. Horseshoes were supposedly the perfect weapon to ward off the mysterious creatures of the forest like goblins and elves, who for some reason were scared of metal. These days, in some parts of the world, horseshoes are handed out to newly married brides. Also, if I remember correctly, if you hang a horseshoe right side up, that's supposed to collect the good luck, and you don't want to hang it upside down. So that's another part of that. You're welcome. Hashtag Mike Facts. Most parents will be aware of this fact, but for those of us who haven't taken the stroll towards parenthood yet, this might come as a surprise. A baby's body has 300 bones in it, compared to the 206 human adults have. Babies need to be more flexible during birth. As such, most of their extra bones will fuse or grow together by the time they're around 3. It's also interesting to note that some of a baby's bones are made entirely from cartilage, while others are only partly made up of cartilage. If you thought human lovemaking was messy, then you have not heard about how bedbugs do it. First off, the process is called, and I kid you not, traumatic insemination, which gives you an idea of what's to come. Okay, brace yourselves. Male bedbugs have sharp, needle-shaped penises, which actually stab through the body of their lucky counterpart. Then comes the more familiar stage, where the male leaves some of his sperm inside. The whole process lasts less than a couple of minutes, but it's a horrifying ordeal for the female. Wow, I never thought I'd feel so bad for a bedbug. Whether you like it or not, you judge people based on their appearance. So do I, so do the rest of us. However, it's not by choice. In fact, according to recent research from psychologists at the University of Melbourne, prejudice against people we find ugly is a natural defense mechanism we utilize to keep ourselves healthy. Although ugliness is subjective, everyone considers specific characteristics such as bodily fluids and skin disorders unattractive. Hey! Feeling personally attacked here. Oh no! Unconscious bias against people with less than flattering appearances is a worldwide issue that has significant repercussions in people's lives. Ugly people are less employable, less successful, and more likely to be heavily sentenced if they find themselves accused in court. This superstition once again goes back to the Celts. Now, they were really lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Their belief that four-leaf clovers were lucky seems to have fused with Christianity at some point, and now any St. Patrick's Parade or Irish bar displays them everywhere. One estimate puts the odds of finding a four-leaf clover at 1 in 10,000. That's about the same as getting struck by lightning, although I'd definitely rather have one than the other. In 2009, Masaki Kobayashi, a scientist at Japan's Tohoku Institute of Technology, decided to look into human bioluminescence. He enlisted the help of 5 people and took pictures of their bodies for 20 minutes every 3 hours for 3 consecutive days. The images were captured using cameras that were extremely sensitive to light. The results revealed that certain parts of the people, such as their necks and heads, displayed light continuously, reaching their brightest point around 4 o'clock every afternoon. Scientists believe our bioluminescence is created through the interactions of molecules called fluorophores. After interacting with the electrons, our cells release via cellular respiration. Unfortunately, we can't see it, as it's about 1,000 times too weak for our eyes to pick up. When a wound is opened up on the surface of our body, underneath a bunch of compounds are sent to the injured spot. The most important of those is vitamin K, which will rush to the injury to put a stop to the bleeding ASAP. If you nick yourself and find that it's taking a little too long to clot, it's probably because you have a vitamin K deficiency. The good news is that it's found in some pretty tasty food, from bacon and pork chops to chicken and goose liver. Okay, maybe not that last one. For the vegetarians out there, the highest concentration of vitamin K is found in cooked kale, along with spinach and broccoli further down the list. In the 1960s, Jose Delgado, a Spanish neurologist at Yale University, was not only confident that electrical stimulation of the nervous system was vital to understanding the biological roots of social behavior, but he was also willing to prove his case in a very unusual way. On a spring evening in 1964, he met Lucero, a 250-kilogram fighting bull that belonged to a landowner by the name of Ramon Sanchez, who had agreed to let Delgado use a tiny exercise ring on his estate in Cordoba for the experiment. Delgado implanted radio-controlled electrodes into Lucero's brain several days before the experiment. The results surprised everyone. Lucero charged towards him, and Delgado pressed the remote control button. I literally have a remote control button, I could have pressed it. This instantly subdued the animal's rage, and Lucero slid to a halt and trotted away. Delgado's experiment was significant enough to feature on the front page of the New York Times. You know that feeling when you teach someone a game and they immediately beat you at it? You might brush it off as beginner's luck as a joke, but in your mind, it can be a real thing. It's part of what's called confirmation bias in psychology, which is when you subconsciously select information that supports something you already believe. Because beginner's luck is such a widely believed idea, when you see your friend beat you at their first shot at something, well, this bias kicks in. Nature is incredible. If you've never heard of Parthonogenesis, let me remind you of Jeff Goldblum's words in Jurassic Park. Life finds a way. Parthonogenesis is the type of reproduction that takes place when a female produces offspring without a male's help. One animal that uses this method in the wild is the Komodo dragon. Since they're used to an isolated lifestyle and can get very violent when approached, they've evolved to reproduce both parthenogenetically and sexually. You know, depending on their mood. In case you needed another reason to be creeped out by spiders, their movements are some of the strangest out of any animal. That's because they don't move using muscles like we do. Instead, their bodies are filled with a kind of fluid that's pushed around depending on which leg needs to move. Yes, this is fluid mechanics. And yes, this is very similar to cars or robots. So they're basically fast, sneaky, and deadly machines. Great. In 1946, being a guinea pig for the British government's Common Cold Unit was extremely popular among students. They saw it as an inexpensive holiday with free lodging and huge flats fully furnished with games, books, radio, and telephone. They were even paid 3 shillings every day. I'm gonna go convert that. I'll be right back. According to my quick research, 1 shilling was worth 24 cents. So 3 of them is gonna be 72 cents. So 72 cents in 1946 is $11.27 today, or 8.6 pounds sterling. The unpleasant aspect of the experiment began when the participants were forced to spend 30 minutes in a windy, cold corridor after taking a hot bath, were forced to wear wet socks for the remainder of the day, and were infected with nasal mucus from a cold sufferer. Ugh. Gross. Oh God. The experiments did prove, however, that the common cold had nothing whatsoever to do with cold weather. Are you feeling an itch on the inside of your hand? According to a number of different cultures, it's a sign that you might be about to have some financial success. Ah, damn it. I don't think I've ever had itchy palms. Physically, itchy palms come from skin conditions or other things like contact with certain chemicals. These could be from working in harmful environments, in which case you very well could be in line to win a lawsuit from your employer. So just find a good attorney. Did you know that if processed into glycol, peanut oil can be used as a key ingredient in nitroglycerin, the explosive secret inside dynamite? It's true, but the experts advise against using it, as it's pretty labor intensive. Glad that's the only reason they advise against it. So just how many peanuts do you need to make 1 pound of dynamite? Well, apparently that's a closely guarded secret. Nuts. You know how after having a big meal, it always feels like we have a second stomach for dessert? Well, ants have the same, but for real, and for a very different reason. Some species of ant use the first section of their stomach for what's called social eating. This means sharing their food with other members of their colony. They hold onto it, refrain from digesting it, and regurgitate it later as needed. You know what? I'd rather just skip a meal. By using a human gene, scientists were recently able to significantly increase the size of a monkey's brain. The ARHGAP11B gene was given to 101-day-old marmoset fetuses by scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Molecular Cell Biology and Genetics. The gene has been demonstrated to increase the formation of stem cells in the brain. In fact, scientists believe it played an essential part in the history of human evolution. The marmosets quickly reacted to the foreign gene. The neocortex portion of their brains, which is responsible for reasoning and language, was found to be significantly enlarged by the mad scientists. Planet of the Apes, anyone? It's a common superstition that making a wish after seeing a shooting star makes sure that it comes true. Shooting stars are actually meteors entering our planet's atmosphere, and the chances are much higher than you might think. About 25 million cross the Earth's sky every single day, some much smaller than others. According to ancient Greek beliefs, these are the gods descending to Earth. The animal kingdom and its seemingly intense standards of evolution amaze me. From cockroaches that can survive nuclear blast to pufferfish utilizing a neurotoxin as a defense mechanism, nature often over-delivers in its presentation. The chitin, a marine mollusk that inhabits the Gulf of Mexico, has similarly outdone itself in the evolution game by figuring out how to grow metal teeth. Magnetite teeth, to be exact. A magnetic material composed of iron oxide. Thus far, this has been the hardest material to be produced by any organism. Perhaps we'll be able to copy nature at some point in the future by synthesizing hard materials into laboratories using the proteins that come from chitin's teeth. For now, though, we can only wonder why a mollusk in the Gulf of Mexico would need metal teeth. If mitochondria ever commit a crime, we'll be able to use DNA evidence against it. Mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell, are found in all plants and animals. Chloroplasts are similar, but found in plants, and are the thing that drives photosynthesis. But these two engines also have their own identity, their own unique DNA. It's usually very resistant to degradation, but this isn't permanent. Drinking too much alcohol or taking other harmful chemicals can damage mitochondrial DNA. So if you're about to drink too much, just think of your mitochondria. Scientists have discovered that pig bladder tissue may be processed into a powder, dubbed extracellular matrix, and used it to regrow human fingers. Unlike typical mammals, which repair injuries by producing scar tissue that blocks future cell regrowth, the cells that reside in the lining of a pig's bladder carry a protein that induces entire tissue regrowth, similar to how lizards regrow their tails. So far, the procedure has been used to reattach severed fingers, grow new fingertips, and have even assisted in regenerating one injured Iraq War veteran's muscles. The moon has been a source of curiosity since humans began looking up to the skies. It's where we get the words lunatic and menstruation from. But can it really affect behavior, as some believe? A study from 2018 showed that people's moods may sync with the moon. Researchers linked it to the changes in a person's circadian rhythm, which is the body's 24-hour cycle. Full moons, for example, can make it harder to sleep and impact this circadian rhythm. If someone's acting a little out of character, check the moon. Just when you think things couldn't get any weirder, we drop this bombshell on you. A grasshopper's auditory organs can be found in a particularly weird area: its belly. Membranes that reverberate in response to sound waves can be found on each side of a grasshopper's first abdominal segment, tucked away safely under its wings. This incredible eardrum, known as a tympanum, allows a grasshopper to hear the melodies of its fellow grasshoppers, even if it doesn't really pick up on the pitch of a song that well. How you look, from the proportions of your face down to your fingers' measurements, are all determined by your genes. That includes skin color. And in this respect, we aren't so different from wildlife. It turns out that unlike most things, there's a single gene responsible for about 30% of skin color in humans, and this gene can be traced back to the zebrafish, where it has the same function. Our last common ancestor with these fish was more than 400 years ago, and still we aren't all that different. Except we aren't fish. And we aren't cold-blooded. And we can't survive underwater. Okay, maybe we are a little different. Scientists at Australia's The Florey Institute unveiled a rodent-based experiment in 2020, claiming it gave them fresh insights into neurodivergent behavior. It's difficult to assess a mouse's attention span. Many scientists have tried, but the mouse usually loses interest and starts squirming and wandering about. They were placed in a testing box to keep the mice from escaping and held in place using laser beams. The mice were then rewarded with a strawberry milkshake if they could probe it with their noses as a stimulus flashed on a screen. It may sound quaint to feed mice milkshakes in exchange for poking their noses onto a screen, but scientists believe it might advance their knowledge of neurodivergent behavior. Furthermore, it opens up new avenues for future studies into the effects of medications and genetics on autism and other comparable disorders. An old legend claims that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but most science tells us that you can never actually reach the end. That's because a rainbow is a visual phenomenon caused by the refraction of white light going through a rain droplet and being scattered at different angles with different colors. However, some pictures have captured the end of a rainbow, like this one coming down onto a group of trees. There's no pot of gold in sight, but has anyone tried digging there yet? The corpse flower is famous for its size. These weird plants can grow up to 8 feet tall. For reference, I'm 5'10", so here? However, there's another not so pleasant fact about this massive plant. It has a particularly horrible odor. It smells just like rotting flesh, hence the name corpse plant. While many believe this repulsive feature is designed to detract prey, it's actually designed to attract pollinators. Because dung beetles and flesh flies enjoy a fresh corpse, this is an inviting pit stop. This bizarre science fact gets even stranger because this plant can simulate a human body by heating its core to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. This process is known as thermogenesis, and it only serves to attract more insects. I wonder how it compares to a durian. I've smelled durian. It's not great. I've yet to smell a corpse plant. You'd be unlucky to find yourself ingesting denatonium benzoate, which is a chemical used in cleaning products and to make denatured alcohol. But if you did, there's a high chance you wouldn't even be able to swallow it. It holds the title of the most bitter substance on Earth. Even at a dilution of 30 parts per million, it's too bitter for almost anyone to swallow. That's also why it's used in a range of pesticides to make them less dangerous for children. Science can be stupid. Ilkka Hansky, a Finnish biologist, placed the Glanville fritillary butterfly on the lonely island of Sotunga decades ago to study how a population of one species could live inside a hostile habitat. He had no idea that the butterflies harbored a stomach-bursting parasitic wasp, and that those wasps, in fact, came with their own smaller stomach-bursting hyperparasite. The wasps exploded when the butterflies were released on Sotunga, spreading throughout the island with their hosts. This experiment presented later scientists with not only an interesting ecological study, but also an urgent reminder that before moving endangered species into unexplored regions, we must first understand the physiological webs that thrive around them. Dreams are theaters for our mind to run wild, sometimes in horrifying directions. If you've ever had a dream of your teeth falling out, you'll know how frightening this can be. The science behind it is usually related to distress or anxiety. Stress can even lead to grinding your teeth during your sleep, which can explain why they pop up in your dreams too. Or pop out, I guess. You know what? Since we've already ruined vanilla cupcakes for you, I thought we'd go to the extra mile and warn you against the Lone Star tick. You see, if one of these horrible parasites bites you, you could develop an allergy to red meat, including pork and beef. This allergy is caused by a type of carbohydrate known as alpha-gal, and is best diagnosed through a blood test. Making a giant facility big enough to have its own weather sounds like a conspiracy theory. But it's true though. NASA has done just that at the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida. There's a structure there that stands over 500 feet tall, has a total volume of almost 1.3 million cubic feet, and is used to put together those huge spacecraft. This also makes it big enough for clouds to form inside, which is solved by 10,000 tons of air conditioning controlling the mini-climate. I knew it! They were controlling the weather! That's sarcasm for any of you conspiracy theorists out there. It was a joke. In the past, scientists feverishly tried to stop the flow of blood below the belt. Masturbation was blamed for anything, from insane violence to rounder shoulders. Some tried prayer, others diet, which is how an early form of graham crackers was produced, while others understood that medical remedies were the only option. They discovered that when exposed to potassium bromide, participants masturbated less. The drug was heralded as a specific cure until doctors found that people basically did everything less while under the influence of potassium bromide. Masturbation was promptly rebranded as something that drives the great majority of internet traffic, while the substance was promptly rebranded as nothing more than a sedative. A survey found that more than half of people believed that this was a good signal that rain was coming. While a direct link hasn't been found between cows lying down and the weather forecast, they do tend to stay standing up in higher temperatures. Other animals have similar predictive powers, with sharks anticipating hurricanes and snakes fleeing before earthquakes are felt. A neutron star is what remains if a massive star larger than 10 suns runs out of fuel. It would have collapsed, exploded, and collapsed again. Under the pressure of the collapse, its protons and electrons have fused to form neutrons, which ensures that it cannot collapse again. The star obviously loses a lot of weight in the process and ends up being only about 1.5 times the mass of the sun. Still, all of that matter has been condensed to a size of about 10 miles. A typical star of that magnitude would span more than 1 million miles. To put this into perspective, look at it like this. A tablespoon of the sun would weigh around 5 pounds, or 2 kilograms, depending on where you scooped it, about the weight of an old laptop. However, a single teaspoon of a neutron star will weigh more than 1 billion tons, or 900 billion kilograms. That's more than Mount Everest's weight. So while you can lift a spoonful of sun, it would never be possible with a spoonful of neutron stars. Ow. Delicious neutron stars. The magnetic fields on Earth are mysterious, powerful forces. Since they are invisible to us, experts once thought that it was impossible for animals to feel them. However, we have slowly discovered that from birds to sea turtles, many animals are directed by magnetic fields. The mole rat is one of these. Although they are blind from perceiving light, their eyes have a receptor allowing them to see magnetic fields. It's not as though they're seeing magnetism like Neo in the Matrix. Instead, their receptors are connected to the brain in a way that would be more like a sense than a vision. Winthrop Kellogg had an unhealthy interest in the concept of feral children. A comparative psychologist, Winthrop and his wife obtained a baby chimp named Gua in early 1930s and raised her alongside their young son Donald. Gua originally outperformed Donald in tests including memory, reflexes, handwriting strength, agility, climbing, language comprehensions, problem solving, and other skills. But she soon reached a plateau, and Donald, instead of speaking English, started to mimic the vocalizations of his sister Gua. Shortly after, the Kellogg's abruptly halted the experiment without much explanation. While Gua showed no signs of learning anything else, the couple received more than they hoped for when their son Donald became more ape than man. Spend a decent amount of time on a boat and you'll probably hear this rule of thumb. As it turns out, there's solid evidence to back it up too. The redness in the sky comes from water vapor, meaning there are possibilities of storms as this vapor moves closer over the day. That's why it's a sailor's warning. If the red sky appears closer to sunset, though, it means that upstream, further to the west, the coast is much clearer. That's how much sugar it contains. And while I would have loved to tell you that it's only in theory, I'd be lying. It's already been done by a man called James Gilpin. He gets his source material from elderly volunteers, including his grandmother, and purifies it just like you'd purify water, by removing the sugar molecules and adding it to the mash stock to expedite fermentation. Traditionally, the sugar used would be made from the starches in the mash. Once metabolized into an uncolored alcohol spirit, whiskey blends are added to provide color, flavor, and viscosity. And the end result is bottled with the contributor's name and age. 79-year-old Martha, anyone? Anyone? No? Alright. Triboluminescence is a word for a very strange phenomenon. When some materials are crushed, they release a small surge of light. This happens with things like quartz crystals and mercury, or by ripping apart Scotch tape. Even stranger, some types of candy can produce the effect too. Which ones? Wintergreen flavored lifesavers are apparently the best. Their color comes from a flavoring called methyl salicylate, which is fluorescent, and when it's broken down by smashing, cracking, or chewing, this compound absorbs ultraviolet light and shoots it out as a bright blue light. In 2021, scientists decided to mess around with spiders yet again by creating a daddy short-legged spider. They achieved this not-so-amazing feat by turning off essential genes in the daddy longlegs. After the gene modification, the limbs of the crippled daddy shortlegs changed not only in size but also in morphology, morphing into short food-manipulating appendages known as pedipalps. This provided the scientists a peek into the types of organisms from which daddy longlegs might have developed from 400 million years ago. And this isn't the final mutant arachnid the scientists want to make. They also want to alter spider fangs to learn more about that lovely part of spider evolution. This is also known as a total lunar eclipse, but blood moon certainly has a better ring to it. About every 3.5 years, 2 of them occur. For ancient cultures, the red color was a sign of danger or imminent attack. It appears red because this is the color with the longest wavelength, and when the moon is in Earth's shadow during this lunar eclipse, only these long waves can reach it from the sun. Our teeth and bones may be white, hard, and full of calcium, but the similarities end there. For one, teeth only possess phosphorus, calcium, and other minerals, whereas bones contain phosphorus, calcium, and sodium, but mainly collagen. Plus, bones are not nearly as tough as teeth. However, bones do one-up teeth in the regenerative department, as teeth can't heal themselves when they break or fracture, and can't produce red blood cells. Finally, our bones are hidden away underneath muscle, flesh, and skin, while our teeth are out in the open and displayed. Bones, not so much. So while we may have to whiten our teeth, at least we don't have to worry about our bones turning yellow. Except when they meet oxygen, though hopefully our bones won't be outside our bodies for extended periods of time anytime soon. Although I'm sure this news will sadden Titus Andromedon. Teeth are outside bones. Cold weather makes our muscles tighten and contract. The extreme version of this is shivering, where our body is trying to generate some heat. But this is nothing compared to what shrews do. These little animals have an even more drastic response to the cold. At the beginning of winter, their entire body shrinks, including their entire skull and brain, by between 15 and 20%. This makes it easier to keep the body ticking since less energy needs to come in. Could you imagine losing 1/5 of your head every year, though? Everyone is familiar with feeling fear. But where does it originate? In 2011, researchers attempted to find the answer by experimenting with a human subject identified only as SM, who could not feel fear. SM had lesions on her amygdala, a portion of the brain previously known to be important in our fear experience. SM was subjected to snakes, spiders, a haunted mansion, hopefully the one at Disney, death threats, robberies, and terrifying movies. Oh god. Yet she felt no fear. As such, the researchers concluded that fear indeed originates from the amygdala. Then in 2013, the same researchers tested SM again, because why not? This time they made her inhale CO2, which gave her the sensation of suffocating. This time, to everyone's surprise, SM did not remain calm. Instead, she experienced a panic attack, much like the other individuals in the experiment who had also suffered from amygdala damage. The findings demonstrated that the amygdala is not the only area of the brain that processes fear, and that the research should probably continue. Yeah, it is not one I'm signing up for. I hate horror movies. Just nope. Nope. Not the video game. Since humans have been farming from the earth, it's been important to know exactly when the best time is to plant crops. That's where the harvest moon comes from, which is when the moon is close to what's called the autumnal equinox. This is important for farmers because it means more light in the evenings, meaning longer work hours, and more food for everyone. Although, as a fan of Disney at night, I don't like daylight savings time. I think Disney at night is amazing. I mentioned it in the video where I came back. Disney at night is the greatest. How are you going to have an entire land that looks amazing at night looking at you, Pandora, and close the park early? I don't like daylight savings time. Sorry. Which one do you prefer, daylight savings time or not? Let me know in the comments below. Regular time. What is it? Just normal. Cranberries are incredibly good for you. Not only are they full of antioxidants, but they can also stop cavities, tooth decay, and gum disease. They even contain compounds called proanthocyanidins, which many believe could lower our chances of getting cancer. However, for all of their health benefits, their most exciting ability must be that they can bounce. Really bounce. If you drop a fresh cranberry, it'll bounce just like a rubber ball. Old or damaged berries don't bounce. This bouncing ability is actually tested at the sorting mills before they can pass the quality test. The stoplight loose jaw looks like something out of a horror film. Its gigantic jaw makes up 25% of its entire length and is fitted with jagged, sharp teeth. But what's even scarier about this fish is the reason it's called stoplight. Close to its eyes are organs that produce both green and red lights, just like traffic lights. These act as a kind of laser dot sight to locate other animals. Depths at below 1,600 feet where the stoplight is found don't see the color red. It's basically like an invisible red dot of a sniper rifle. K-Star scientists announced a new world record for a high-temperature artificial sun in December 2020. The imitating star achieved an eye-watering 100 million degrees Celsius and held that temperature for 20 seconds, more than tripling the previous record. K-Star, which stands for Korea Superconducting Tokamak Advanced Research, uses magnetic fields to create plasma, a peculiar form of matter. The plasma is then heated to enormous temperatures comparable to the sun's. Researchers plan to employ this method to create power through nuclear fusion one day. However, a lot of work remains to be done before they can achieve their goals. Staff at K-Star would like to be able to maintain 100 million degrees for up to 5 minutes by 2025. If you ever catch a fish jumping out of the water, it's supposed to be a good thing. Many believe there is a connection with positivity, change, and even fertility. Do they really leap into the air though? Absolutely. Though mainly when they're scared, in danger, or in hot pursuit of their own food. In fact, salmon can leap over 10 feet into the air. Right into a bear's mouth sometimes. Talk about bad luck. We thought we'd add another bizarre yet fun fact for you here at number 2. Did you know that 5 billion joules of energy are generated every time a lightning bolt hits the earth? When we started playing around with the math, that means that your run-of-the-mill everyday toaster will be able to run for a total of 84,000 minutes on an energy of a single strike. If it's a 2-slicer, that boils down to just enough time to toast 100,000 muffins, bagels, Pop-Tarts, or slices of bread until it reaches the perfect level of crunchiness to go with your favorite morning drink. I don't recommend running outside during a lightning storm to try to toast your bread though. Please don't do that. Most insects buzzing around the house catch your attention immediately. But probably not this next one. Dicopomorpha ecmaterygis, better known as fairy flies, measure about 140 micrometers in length, which is equal to 5/1000th of an inch. That's even smaller than some forms of bacteria. Unlike normal houseflies, these are parasites that bury themselves in wasps, but they can also be used against certain insects, making them useful for protecting agriculture. The following experiment definitely borders on insanity. In one of the most disturbing experiments on our list today, Leo Stanley, the medical director at California's San Quentin prison, surgically transplanted the testicles of executed felons into living inmates between 1910 and the early 1950s. 40 years of this, dear God. Stanley believed that males who committed crimes all had low testosterone levels, and that increasing these levels would reduce crime rates? Really? Okay. More than 10,000 prisoners, oh my God, were subjected to Stanley's theory, and when human testicles became scarce, he began injecting liquefied animal testicles into the prisoners. How'd that go for you, Stanley? Did it work? Spoiler alert, no. Is your neighbor's dog howling at night again? Aside from ruining your sleep, it could be an omen of death, if you're the superstitious type. That could be it. Or it could be from anxiety or the way to mark their territory. Another reason is a way to communicate long distances. Maybe it's time to buy these dogs a phone. Did you know your nose could pick up over 1 trillion distinct scents? Funnily enough, one of the most pleasant scents, according to our noses anyway, is the smell of vanilla. Or should I say recycled plastic? During recent studies, scientists discovered that our sense of smell is at its strongest at the end of the day and at its weakest during the night and into the early morning hours. They now believe that this reduction in our smell sensitivity throughout the night might explain why odors don't generally wake people up from their sleep. Humans have been sending things to space since the Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957, and unfortunately, humans leave behind a lot of trash. There are an estimated 9,000 metric tons of debris still orbiting our planet right now, mainly made up of launching equipment, old satellites, and wreckage from accidents. That's why the European Space Agency is launching Clear Space 1 in the next couple of years, which will use robotic arms to steer certain space debris back into Earth's atmosphere, where it'll be broken up by pressure and gases before ever reaching the ground. It's only the beginning, but cleaning up space will be an impressive achievement for science. One of our most important unsolved questions is whether or not humans are alone in the universe. Though that remains to be answered, it hasn't stopped our brightest scientists from figuring out what to do in case some of those little green men eventually turn out to be hostile. To approach the problem, Columbia University astronomers examined how we observe the cosmos to find other planets. When we identify a star anywhere in the universe, we check for minor dimmings in its brightness that can suggest the presence of a planet around it, leaving the astronomers with the conclusion that we could hide ourselves from anyone looking for us by utilizing lasers to counteract the dimness of our own sun. Not only could we potentially do it, we were already equipped with the technology to pull it off. A bird slamming into your window doesn't sound like a good thing, but according to some, it's linked to changes in life. Hopefully not just changing a broken window. The science behind it is pretty simple. Birds aren't that great at figuring out that glass is solid, especially when there are reflections of trees on it. And to be fair to them, most of us have walked into a glass door at least once before. I have a story about that. I was at a party with my grandma and some of her friends, and I went inside, or I stepped outside to ask anyone if they needed anything. I just went, hey, anyone need anything? Apparently in that split second, my grandma shut the door. So I was like, anyone need anything? Nope. Wham! So